Welcome into Eastern Panhandle Talk. Our guest in the 9 o'clock segment is Scot Faulkner, the author of the critically acclaimed bestseller, Naked Emperors, The Failure of the Republican Revolution, ? He advises numerous corporations on strategic change and leadership. He's appeared on Bloomberg, CBS News, CNN, C-SPAN, Fox, NPR, PBS, Voice of America. Scot, again, about your book, by the way, I know you brought it with you. Tell us about the book for a moment, and
Sure.
Can you still get it
Yes,
in
you can
print?
get it on it and on Amazon. And it's, in a nutshell, I was the first chief administrative officer of the House of Representatives. This is back in 1994. The Republicans take control, the Gingrich Republican Revolution, as it was called at the time. 40 years out of power, Republicans come in the door. I was tasked to clean up the place, because people might remember that in the early 1990s there were scandal after scandal after scandal, because the Democrats, after being in office close to 40 years at that time, became a kleptocracy. They were just stealing the place blind. And so you had the banking scandal, the post office scandal, the restaurant scandal, and numerous other ones that ultimately put people like Rostenkowski in prison. And that was part of what people talk today about the health issue and other things regarding Clinton. But I think that steady drumbeat of 91, 92, 93 of scandal after scandal, showing that the Democrats, who had been in control for 40 years, never really been seriously tested or challenged during that period by the Republicans, had just become totally lost, ethically, morally, intellectually, and they were tossed out. And part of the contract with America, most of which ultimately was legislative and died either in the Senate or on Clinton's desk, one part of it was to bring Congress into the 20th century, into the 21st century, really, have it fall under federal regulations, which it always exempted itself from, and to make sure that the swamp, ethical swamp, got drained and could never happen again. And so my book is about that ethical swamp, and the unfortunate bottom line of the book is, even though we cleaned up the mess that the Democrats left, the Republicans created one of their own.
It's interesting, and you bring that up, too, and it's very topical, because Newt Gingrich, who recently declared officially, threw his name in the ring.
Right, this last week.
Was interviewed on CNN. I heard the radio clip of it this morning. He said where the Republican Revolution failed was when I listened to some of our, what did he call them? For lack of a better word, zealots on the conservative side, who were telling me things that they passionately believed to be true, but weren't necessarily true of the American people in general, even those who vote Republican. And that's the reason why the revolution, as he called it, failed or kind of hit the brakes prematurely. You agree with that?
Absolutely not. I think that Newt always...
Is that Gingrich trying to blame somebody else?
Gingrich trying to blame somebody else. I mean, he was the architect of the revolution. He was also the destroyer of the revolution. He, several issues. One, after the 100 days where he got everything in the contract with America passed through the House, he had nothing. He had no strategic plan. And I was sitting on his transition team, and I said, let's start working on the budget. Let's start holding oversight hearings. Let's start really using the appropriation process to explain to the American people how bad things are and how things need to change. And it went right over their heads, in part because Bob Livingston and the what they called the cardinals of the Appropriation Committee, many of them saw, after 40 years of the Democrats raiding the Treasury, it was their turn. So Gingrich basically gave Livingston and the cardinals a wide berth, which was a huge mistake. And so when the budget battle came up in the fall of '95, the Republicans had not laid the groundwork for making a cogent argument, and that's why Clinton prevailed, even though the government shut down for a few days. The other part was, and this is again where Gingrich is changing history, he began his affair the summer of '95 with Callista, not '98, and everybody knows it, and that affected his brain cells, and I call it the zipper problem, and that a lot of members of Congress have, even to this day. And so he already lost focus by the summer of '95. He had lost strategic momentum by Easter of '95, and it unraveled from there.
And Clinton was able to quack the Defense Department every time he needed money for any of his social programs.
Right. Well, the key is that
The peace dividend.
Right. Well, the peace dividend was squandered.
Yep.
And we basically, I talk about that we're really in the age of Commodus, that if you look at the Roman history and the fact that you had Marcus Aurelius and what they called the five good emperors brought the Roman Empire to its zenith, and then Commodus comes in for 20 years, and after that it was a slow decline. I mean, within 60 years, they went through 6 emperors in 1 year. It was chaos, but the thing is, the tipping point happened, and we're kind of in the age of Commodus right now. We had Ronald Reagan, who brought America to its zenith. We defeated the Soviet Empire. We were astride economically every possible way in the world. And then you had Bush, one who basically eradicated everything he could about Reagan. His people hated Reagan. Then you had Clinton, who basically spent 8 years flatlining. At least he stayed out of the economy enough to let the information age happen, but that's about it. And then Bush II, who was the antithesis of the Reagan revolution, and now we're into Obama. And the only reason that a lot of people are upset with Obama is because of, they're saying socialism and things, but Bush was a statist unto himself. So he gave Obama an 8-year running start to what's now happening. And in all that period, except for a few balanced budgets, which happened mostly because of economic vitality, not because of any real fiscal discipline, we're now at this brink financially that, as I tell my wife, we're so far down the wrong decision tree, almost any action is wrong.
And that takes us to our next segment, which is how do we fix this and get it back on the right path? Can it even be fixed is the first question I'm going to ask you when we come out of the break here. We're talking with Scot Faulkner, and we'll be right back with more on Eastern Panhandle Talk. Your call's welcome to at 304-263-6540.
This is Talk Radio WRNR Martinsburg.
9:36. This is Eastern Panhandle Talk for Monday. Jerry Mays, my co-host. Scot Faulkner is our guest here, the author of Naked Emperors, The Failure of the Republican Revolution, still available on Amazon.com, a bestseller, by the way. We were leading into the break with the economic issues. You were talking about the fact that we're kind of in the Commodus reign right now in the American empire. That's not a good thing, by the way.
Yeah, we went to different schools together.
Yeah. You and Commodus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here we are. The debt ceiling, I think today is the day we actually bumped the debt ceiling, and now Scott Geithner has to play some tricks with the accounting numbers to make us get another 11 weeks out of this.
Tell us another lie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can this be fixed at all, Scott Faulkner?
It can, but it took us literally 40, 50 years to get into this hole. It's not one vote, one fiscal year isn't going to get us out. And so unfortunately we have people across the political spectrum, leaders of both parties, who are just campaigning and politicking about this. They're not doing anything that's going to be real. When you start talking about budget resolutions and cuts over 10 years, guess what? There's 5 election cycles during there, and people will just reverse it. So this is all just pap for either MSNBC if you're a liberal, or pap for Fox if you're a conservative. And it's unfortunate because Congress got into this mess in part because it is not done its most fundamental duty, which is oversight. Oversight is not very sexy unless you're people like myself who think it is sexy. But the key is that the government spends $1 trillion, now I guess about $1.5 trillion a year, and there are lots and lots of leaky faucets, and they're leaking $1 million here, $1 billion there, $100 billion in some other places, and going after that. Harnessing the 73 individuals who are statutorily mandated within the agencies, bringing in the auditors from the General Accounting Office, now called the Government Accountability Office, and making them rock stars in front of hearings, and literally taking on a daily basis their findings and forcing agencies to actually implement them. Because right now, most of the IG reports, their recommendations, most of the GAO reports and their recommendations go onto the dustbin of history. And literally, we're looking at least $500 billion of waste of fraud, abuse, of inefficiency, of ineffective programs that could be wiped off the books right now if you just simply plunged into the IG reports and the Inspector General/IG reports, the GAO reports, and just force them into implementation. But nobody wants to do it.
$500 billion?
$500 billion.
Over what time period?
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year. You're saying there's $500 billion of waste and fraud right there in the budget.
Right now.
Doesn't surprise me.
You go into if people, yourselves and listeners, sign up for governmentexecutive.com. It's the Government Executive magazine, comes out every month, and every day they publish Inspector General report recommendations. And I'm going to be posting 2 when I get back from this radio interview. One is a $400 million waste in the HUD programs. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, some of them are not big, $1 million, $10 million. And other things are just things that you hear about. They haven't gone to the point of an IG report yet, but there's $1 billion being spent in Northern Virginia for the base realignment and closure, BRAC, and they're not closing bases. They're just swapping around office buildings. They're building one of the largest office buildings in America in Northern Virginia near a 2-lane road where there isn't any cloverleaf. There's no metro. There's no Virginia Rail Express, and even Fairfax County is saying it's the worst land use decision in the history of Northern Virginia, which is saying something.
I used to live there. I can vouch for that.
Yeah, but the congressman that rules that area there is saying, look at all these jobs I'm bringing you.
Yeah, but the thing is all the jobs currently sit in Crystal City, and they were saying it's all about safety. Well, right now, all of these, most of them are defense-related, civilian defense-related jobs. They're spread out in office buildings all over Northern Virginia. They're in leased space. And if I'm a terrorist, would take me years to figure out where those offices are. Now they're going to put everything in one building, and outside the 50-mile blast zone, it's inside the Beltway, which means that you're now creating, and one of the reasons they want to do this is they're saying out of security, but actually you put everything in one building, guess what?
It's easier to hit.
Easier to hit.
Well, it's the same. They're doing the same thing in the Fort Meade area. There's 47,000 people that are going to move in there. NSA was already there. The whatever they call the Army element, they changed its name.
Yeah.
It was already there, and they're adding more.
Absolutely. It's just,
but they have Mark and rail service.
Yeah, at least they got something. But when you start to look at the stupid things, I mean, Homeland Security
was
is probably one of the worst,
horrible.
One of the worst mistakes made in the war on terror. I have a lot of friends because going back to the late 70s when I was with John Ashbrook, he was ranking on the Select Committee on Intelligence. So I've had friends in the intelligence community for many, many years, and they're all saying that because of the Defense Department, because of Homeland Security being created, we actually have declined in our safety because you've got all the bureaucrats. I mean, they've spent $1 billion. They're spending $1 billion, another $1 billion on rehabbing St. Elizabeth's Hospital complex to put in their headquarters. $60 million is being spent just on furniture. Now, if you're consolidating existing agencies, guess what? They all have furniture right now.
Yeah, you can move those desks.
Why are you spending $60 million of our tax dollars just on new furniture? I mean, you start to say, what does that have to do with anything? And that's the problem. But with Congress throwing spitballs at each other and playing to their home turf and campaigning all the time, they could step forward like that, arm in arm. I mean, the thing is that so much of this waste should be bipartisan. I mean, they should be able to embrace and say waste is waste. If it's my favorite program, I don't want a nickel being wasted. If it's a program I hate the most, I don't want it wasted either. And so you could have a conservative Republican and a liberal Democrat arm in arm, waving these IG reports, waving these investigative reports from that the media has exposed and said this stuff's got to stop. They might not get the full $500 billion, but a couple $100 billion. That starts to get, and also the other issue is, and this is, you're dealing with a culture of spending. Congress is there. They live for the photo op. They want to be able to step in front of the microphones and say, I am introducing this bill. And they love to step in front of the microphones with the president, and I'll get handed pens in signing ceremonies. Those are the visuals that the media do and politicians glom onto because they're sexy. But the thing is, that's all additive. The issue is how do we get members of Congress to come at it from the other direction and say, we stopped something from happening. We got rid of this.